Good morning. Thank you for coming this morning. This morning we're fortunate enough to have Dan Peterson here with Franklin to talk to us a little bit. So Dan, I'll turn it over to you.
Excellent. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. On this beautiful day. Well, maybe not so beautiful yet. Sun's supposed to come out a little bit later, right? So that's good. They say snow, but they said snow last night too. Those weather people. The good thing is they're wrong a lot, right? So that's the good news. But I'm so glad I'm here today. I drove in from the west suburbs where my wife and I live, and on my way here I get a call from my boss, and he said, "So where are you going?" And I told him, and he said, "Well, just remember one thing." I said, "Well, what's that?" He said, "If you're not fired with enthusiasm, you will be fired with enthusiasm." I'm very enthusiastic to be with you this morning. And really, when we talk about the markets, a lot of it is market psychology. It's kind of how we think. And if we know how we think, I think it's going to help you out not only in your investment world, but it's also going to help you out in your personal lives as well. Now, if you take a look at this screen, if you can see this, decisions can be challenging. There's a picture of a salad or a picture of a chocolate cake. Now, many of people, when they see a chocolate cake or a salad, your mind is thinking two different ways. Right? Some are saying cake, cake, cake. Some remember that Portillo's chocolate cake that I had one time, right? Very good, I must admit. I would highly recommend. But then you look at this salad, and you're saying, you know what? That's probably good for me, right? You need your greens. So your mind actually is thinking different ways. And there's a reason why it is. So when we look at, and here's the brain, the front part of the brain is basically called the frontal cortex. The frontal cortex is the decision. Basically, it goes through logical decisions. It's the thinking part of your brain, right? So that's the bigger part of your brain, but there's a smaller part of your brain that is called the reflexive part. It's called the amygdala. Now the amygdala, again, is this little small part of the brain, but that is reactionary. So do you ever know somebody who flies off the handle real quick? Everybody knows, and maybe there's some of those in the room. That's because of the amygdala. When I got on the highway today, I merged, and this other car drove by me. In the car, guy in the car, he gave me the finger. And it wasn't this one. Or it wasn't this one either. It was a different one. Now, I could have reacted a couple ways. I could have reacted and did what? Did the same thing back to him. But what happens if you just wait 20 seconds? The amygdala all of a sudden goes to the frontal cortex. It actually goes to the logical thinking. And my logical thinking was, maybe he has a gun. If he has a gun, I don't think it would be a good idea for me to give him the same finger that he gave me back to him, right? That's how thinking works. If you know somebody, or maybe if you're somebody who flies off the handle, before you do it, wait 20 seconds. Because if you just wait that 20 seconds, all of a sudden it goes from the amygdala to the frontal cortex. That's your logical thinking. I will tell you, it will help a lot of people out. Because if we know why we fly off the handle, because some people fly off the handle and the next thing they do is say, "Oh, I'm so sorry that I did that." Well, maybe if they waited 20 seconds, they wouldn't do that as much. But we do the same thing, and we really have done the same thing since the beginning of time. The caveman, when he saw the saber-toothed tiger, the amygdala kicked in. He saw the saber-toothed tiger and he said, I better run, right? So he ran. So the amygdala doesn't always have to be bad. Sometimes it's good because it's that reaction, right? And we'll all have a reaction, so it's not always a negative. But when we talk about the markets, it can be a negative because if the markets were down 1,000 points today, you'd be calling Milton up and saying, what should we be doing? He's like, buy, 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 right? You know? Because our amygdala kicks in and we say, uh-oh, maybe we should do something, right? So we're going to go through some of these barriers as far as psychology. And then we call it the 6 barriers to investment success. Now, a lot of these barriers are things that Milton has been talking to you about for years. So, we'll get to the first one, which is availability bias. Availability bias, and I'll just read the definition. Our thinking is strongly influenced by what is personally most relevant, recent, or traumatic. So if you had a traumatic issue in your life, you will remember that as if it happened yesterday. For example, when I played hockey as a 9-year-old boy out in the west suburbs, and I remember making a move around one guy, and then all of a sudden, this big guy, number 21, just flattened me. I was down on the ice, almost knocked out, but I was getting up, and I remember he was skating away, and I saw 21, Sullivan. Bill Sullivan. I know Bill Sullivan as if it happened yesterday. I will tell you, my wife and I, we went to Canada last year in the winter, and we were looking out our hotel window, and there was an ice rink, and my wife says, let's go ice skating. I said, all right. So we rented some skates. I put on one skate. I closed my eyes for a split second. What do you think I saw? 21, Sullivan. Like it was yesterday. And we all have those situations when we think. For example, 2008, the market was way down, right? We think of that as if it happened yesterday. So when the markets are down now, you call Milton up and you say, I don't want to go through that again. He'll say, go through what again? You know, that 2008. How many years ago was that? 10 years ago, right? 9 to 10 years ago. So we tend to remember that availability bias. I remember as a kid, you might remember when Jaws came out? The movie Jaws came out, and we took a trip down to Florida. I didn't go in the ocean. Because I remember Jaws, right? I will tell you, just 2 years ago, there were more fatalities from people taking selfies than getting killed by a shark. It's true. It's true. So, but when we think of the markets, 2008, the market was down 37%. In 2009, we did a survey. In 2010, we asked people, after the down market of 2008, was 2009, was the market up, flat, or down? Anybody want to guess what the market was in 2009? 2008 was down, flat, up. 2/3 of the people we surveyed said it was down or flat. When in reality, it was up. So we'll have to give you something for that one. A stress ball if you have stress in your life. The market in 2009 actually was up 27%.
Wow.
But I get why people didn't realize that, because we watch the news. The news is always negative. Heck, today the news is always negative and the markets continue to go higher and higher and higher. Right? Bad news sells, unfortunately. When you watch the news, you would think that nothing's going right in this world. You would think nothing's going right in this state. When in actuality, there are a lot of great things that are happening in this state and in this world. We just don't get to hear about them, because that's good news. So, if you just stayed in the market for the last 20 years, you would have averaged about 7.5% a year in the markets. Over the last 20 years, you would average about 7.5% if you just bought and held. But most people don't do that. They get out when? When it's down. And they get out and they want to go back in when it's up. So, if you're somebody who likes to buy clothes when they're twice the price, who likes to buy clothes when it's twice? Who likes to buy them when they're 50% off? Raise your hand. Right? But in our industry, the financial services industry, everybody tends to do the opposite. They run the opposite way. When things are on sale, they say, get me out. That makes no sense. I will tell you, there's two things you should do when the markets are down. Number one, stay the course. Because by staying the course, the managers that Milton is using, they are buying stocks at lower prices. And you are going to benefit from that. So even though you're not adding when it's lower, and by staying the course, you are going to reap the rewards of those managers that are buying lower, right? And the second thing is add more. But retirees always tell me, well, I can't add more because Milton has all my money. So I tell them, then go back to the first rule that I said, and that's stay the course. Again, a lot of people aren't aware that by staying the course, you are actually benefiting. Because a mutual fund, you add to it, well, just because you're not adding, there's thousands of other people that are adding. So the manager takes their money and buys things cheaper, and you get to reap those rewards. The next phrase that we talk about is herding. And I didn't say hurting, but it's herding. We tend to have a herding mentality, right? You know, even on the highway, it seems like, you always want to get in that fast lane, and then you go to the fast lane, and then it becomes the slow lane. It's like when you're shopping, and you're like, okay, which lane should we go in? And you always think, okay, I'm going to go in that fast lane, but then it always becomes that slow lane, right? The herding, we got to be careful, because if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. Not long ago, back in like 2005, a lot of people were going and flipping houses. And everybody said, it's so easy to do. I'll just buy a house, I fix it up, and I sell it for more. That's easy. Well, a lot of people did that, went down to Florida, kept buying up houses, and then all of a sudden, what happened? Market dropped. And now the guy has 10 houses available that he's fixed up and nobody wants them. That's not a good situation to be in. Bitcoin. You might have heard of Bitcoin. I'm not saying to buy or leave Bitcoin alone. I will tell you, Bitcoin, my company does not allow me to buy it because it's not regulated. Milton, his company, would not allow him to buy it because it's not regulated. That should be a red flag. I'm not saying you can't make money in Bitcoin. I'm not saying you can't make money at the casino. Right? When you're speculating, that's one thing. I don't like to speculate, especially with my hard-earned money, right? So when we look at the herding mentality, here's an old Candid Camera. Everybody remember the Candid Camera show? I'm just gonna play this video and see if you can watch how the herding works.
The gentleman in the elevator now is a Candid star. These folks who are entering, the man with the white shirt, the lady with the trench coat, and subsequently one other member of our staff will face the rear. And you'll see how this man in the trench coat tries to maintain his individuality little by little. He looks at his watch, but he's really making an excuse for turning just a little bit more. Now we try it once again. Here's the Candid subject. Here comes the Candid Camera staff, 3 of them at least. And this man has apparently been in groups.
So for those of you who couldn't see, what they did was they had 3 people walk into an elevator, and they all faced the back of the elevator. And the one person that was standing there, they saw everybody facing the back, and they slowly turned to the back, right? Because they were hurting, right? They were going against the grain, so they said, well, these people can't be wrong, right? So there's been a lot of bubbles throughout history. The tulip bubble, that was tulip mania back in the 1600s. Roaring 20s, we had the dot-com, that was the 90s. People were buying companies and they didn't even know what they did in the 90s. They had no earnings, but they kept going up and up and up. That's a bubble, right? And real estate, we just talked about that. People were flipping houses, people were buying real estate. They said, I can't go wrong. Until what? The market fell and they went wrong, right? The problem is we had the most inflows in market history when the market was at the all-time high. Now this is going back to the late 1990s, 2000s. Most money went in when it was high. Most money left the market in 2008 when it was low. Now, I'm sure Milton has told you there's a investing 101 principle that says you buy what? Low, and you sell high. We all know this, yet when the markets go down, that market psychology, like when I sat down with my advisor in 2008, and he knows I'm in the business, and my portfolio was down, just like all of yours in 2008. I said, what's going on? He goes, you know what's going on. The markets are down. I said, yeah, but this is my money we're talking about. Because we all get emotional about our own money, right? That is why we make sometimes the biggest mistakes we'll ever make. People who got out in 2008 have never gotten back in, most of them. And when they do get back in, tell me, because that's probably when we're going to have another downturn, right? Loss aversion. Loss aversion, we actually feel pain twice as much as we feel gain. Let me repeat that. We feel pain twice as much as we feel gain. Pain more than gain, or loss more than gain. That's why when you talk to Milton and you tell him, Milton, I just don't want to lose any money. Does anybody say that? Where's the line of people that wants to lose a lot of money? There's not one of those lines, right? None of us likes to lose money, right? But we feel loss twice as much as we feel gain. if I found a $20 bill on the way to my car, I would be like, hey, all right, 20 bucks. Put it in my pocket. Now tomorrow, go in the same pocket and it's not there. I'm like, oh man. You feel lost twice as much as you feel gain. And that's why after the markets, when they go down, a lot of people say, Milton, I want to get out of the market. I want to go someplace safe. And a lot of people did this. Now, we feel lost at a very young age. In fact, on one of the Tonight shows, they tell people to send in their video clips of their kids. The day after Halloween, you want to tell your kids you ate all of their Halloween candy. And well, let's play the video clip and see what happens. So here's a little boy on the couch. I ate all your Halloween candy.
There's no more candy left in your pumpkin. It's just trash.
Oh no.
All your candy when you went to sleep.
He said, don't you think you ate enough candy last night? He goes, I hope you get a tummy ache. Did you see how much I had? I had.
So good, especially the peanut butter cups.
So we do learn, that's how cruel, right? But we do learn loss at a very young age. But that sticks to us, right? I mean, that's that amygdala. That's the availability. We remember things like they happened yesterday. Loss. We want to avoid loss. A lot of people did that, and what they did was after the markets go down, they want to get safe, and they go into money markets. If you went into money markets, the money markets since 2000 to now, you had a return of 0.08%. It was safe, right? You safely made nothing, right? Oh, and that's not taking into consideration taxes and inflation. So you actually lost a minus 0.65, but you did it safely, right? That's what a lot of people do. Again, a big mistake they do is they get too safe. I tell people the good news is we're living longer. The bad news is we're living longer, right? We need to make our money last. So we need some money in the markets. Present bias, we overvalue immediate rewards at the expense of long-term goals. You probably know some of your kids that do this. Hopefully they don't. Hopefully you've taught them lessons along the way to make sure if they have much extra money to save it or invest it. But these days, a lot of people, given a choice to save for their retirement or buy a new truck, what do? They buy a new truck. That is present bias. They want that immediate gratification. Now, people who have invested, they're going to have that gratification, but it's going to come later. I will tell you, it happens a lot. I see people making $40,000 a year and tell me they don't have enough to invest. I have somebody who makes $300,000 and they tell me they don't have enough to invest. It doesn't matter how much you make, it's how much you what? Save. Pay yourself first. Has Milton ever said that to you? probably 1,000 times. Hopefully you're doing that. They did a study in the 60s, and they told kids, 12-year-old kids, they gave them each one marshmallow. And they said, you can eat the marshmallow, or if you wait a minute, we're going to give you 2 marshmallows. How many kids, what percentage do you think ate the marshmallows? 50%. 50? 90%? It was about 66%. So I think you were the closest there. Do you have stress in your life?
Yes and no.
Well, that's good. That's good. I like that answer. Yeah, so immediate gratification, right? That happens. I mean, these are studies that it's true. In people, it's the same way, right? When people get a bonus check, what do? Spend it. That's why with any of these tax reforms, they do know it doesn't matter how much more money people are going to get, whether it's $200, $300, $400, $1,000, it doesn't matter. What are they going to do with that extra money? Spend it. I was hoping you were going to say invest it with Milton. That's what they should do. But human nature says, hey, I got some extra money in my pocket, right? The national savings rate has declined over time. Not good news, right? I will tell you, if you can teach your kids or grandkids how to save. I taught a class it was 2 years ago, up in Wisconsin where I used to live. And it was to 7th and 8th graders. And it was just for the summer. I volunteered my time. And the last class that I did was how to become a millionaire. They all showed up. And they listened that time. And I told them if you put $100 in the market over your lifetime up until 65, you're going to have over $1 million. And a lot of them said, you know what, that sounds easy. I said, yeah, it is. But it's easier not to do it than to do it. I will tell you, if you teach your grandkids how to save, how to invest, get them started. I will tell you, buy them a stock from Milton and have the certificate so they can start to see that, and tell them they can't sell that certificate. You gotta hold that. If you hold certificates over time, you're gonna see the value goes up. You want good, solid companies, right? The problem is, 41% of the people ages 55 to 64 years old have less than $50,000 in their 401k. 41% of the people 55 to 64 years old have less than $50,000 in their 401k. The problem with that is what? How do you live on that? You don't. You need to plan. And it's never too late, and it's never too early to plan, right? Anchoring. Anchoring really talks about we focus on one bit of information. I'll give you the example of that information. Last December, your portfolios were probably at the highest they have been in a long time. And at the beginning of this year, they probably went a little higher in January. But February, guess what? Oops, market went down. And people remember their high water mark. They say, Milton, my portfolio lost $3,000. You say, did you forget? We made $30,000 over the last couple of years. Yeah, but we lost $3,000. Right? We focus on the high. In the markets, what we need to do is really look at it long term. The markets go up, the markets go down. But if you stay in it for the long haul, you will be extremely happy with your portfolio. And that's anchoring. The last one we'll talk about, home country bias. Can anybody explain to me why there is a 20-year waiting list for the Chicago Bears season tickets? Is it because of that Super Bowl team they have every year? No, it's home team bias. We're gonna support the home team. I will tell you, we do that even in companies. A lot of people in Illinois like to buy John Deere, Caterpillar, Walgreens, any companies that are based in Illinois. People on the West Coast tend to buy technology companies. People down south tend to buy actually a lot of energy companies. Because where is oil? South, right? So it's that home country bias or home state bias, right? Well, we do the same thing in the country. We're buying U.S. as opposed to anywhere outside of U.S. I tell people Europe is a great place to buy some companies. They tell me, I don't want to, oh, Europe is all screwed up. I remember when I lived in Wisconsin, I told people, I got some great investments, but you're not going to like the location. They said, where's the location? I said, Illinois. They said, that state's all screwed up. So I had to teach them, bad address, good company. It's the same thing. In Europe, there's a lot of good companies, they just have a bad address. They're really good companies. So we could get them a little cheaper than some of the companies that are here in the United States. So why would you want to pay a premium when I can pay a discount for a good quality company? It just happens to say that it's outside the U.S. What does Nestle, the company, do? Chocolate. Everybody knows chocolate. But did you know Nestle also does cat food? Dog chow? Perrier? Jack's Pizza? Tombstone Pizza? Smarties, one of my favorites. Smarties. Lean Cuisine. They get you on both sides, right? You are probably buying Nestle when you go to the store and you don't even realize. Why I tell you that is we truly are in a global world. People say, oh, well, Nestle, that's outside the U.S. I say, no, it isn't. We're multinational, right? Look at Ford. Is that U.S.? What percentage of the parts in a car are from outside the U.S.?
62%.
Yeah, more than 50%, way more than 50% of the parts in a Ford are from outside the U.S. So we must start to look global at our investing. In fact, the world market capitalization, the U.S. only makes up about 40% of the opportunities in the world. So if you're just buying U.S., you're kind of closing your eyes to 60% of the opportunities out there. I always tell people, if we had a choice, you could invest in only companies in Illinois, and I got to invest in companies throughout the United States. Who do you think would have a better portfolio? I would probably, because I have more choices, right? It's the same thing investing internationally. I know we went through a lot of the different biases. I know we talked about the big part of your brain, which is the logical thing. That small part of your brain, that's the what? fly off the handle, right? The reactionary, the amygdala, we call it. We got to be careful. We just need to know how we are thinking. I want to end with one of my favorite quotes. Sir Winston Churchill said, "Saving is a very fine thing, especially if your parents have done it for you." So I will turn it back over to Milton.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
very
I
much.
appreciate that.
Just to follow up on a couple of points that Dan was referring to. So if you think about you showing the market being down, and therefore a lot of people took their money out at that point in time. If the market was down 20%, it was down more, right? And now you move into an investment that, let's say, is paying you 3%, how long is it gonna take you to get back the 20% that you just lost? Right? So, and the other thing about losses, you don't incur losses until you actually sell. So valuations will change every day. Losses or gains only occur once. Right, that's when you actually sell it. So if you buy an apartment building, or you buy a stock, you buy a bond, doesn't matter. Valuation, every day you go to your apartment building, it could get revalued every day, right? Did you make money or lose money? You say, well, I made money. No, you didn't. Unless you sold it right at that particular point in time, right? So valuations will continue to just fluctuate on a consistent basis, and gains and losses are only incurred when you actually sell it. That's why you don't pay taxes or able to take a loss off of your taxes until when? So you actually sell what's there for, right? So that's one way to look at it. Anybody hear the news the other day? Rahm Emanuel? Say anything? He was on the news the other day saying that there's now a O'Hare renovation project that he's going to put out there. It was like $8 billion, I think, or something like that, right? And do you remember the one quote that's in there? There's one quote that stood out in my mind. He said, "It won't cost taxpayers." It won't cost taxpayers because it's going to be paid for by the airlines, right? Well, I don't know if anybody's been to O'Hare lately. They said they're going to redo Terminal 2. And I thought to myself, nobody's in Terminal 2. If you ever go out to O'Hare, Terminal 2, it's like pretty much empty. You have United on one end and American on the other, and then you've got the middle, which is Terminal 2, and it's like a lost land. It's like there are a few gates in that. Like they're going to renovate something, they're going to supposedly have more gates, that they're not utilizing the gates that they presently have. And I said, huh? Well, but we're going to be first. So just so you know that. So it won't cost you anything. Just remember that. I'm sorry? We see American Airlines' protest. I think there's going to be a lot of, the airlines are not going to just open up their checkbook, so to speak, and start giving money to the city in that for it. So, and then I was listening to the news today. There's supposed to be a new IPO today by a company called Spotify. They supposedly do music downloading. I don't ask me. I just heard it. But the one thing that caught my ear on that, kind of like the won't cost taxpayers, is that the company is yet to make money. Hasn't made any money. They expect to raise $1 billion in capital.
Overnight.
And I said, well, if I raise $1 billion in money, I'll be in business forever. Because I don't have to make any money, because I should be able on $1 billion to run my company forever if that's the case in it, right? Interest rates, you're seeing a lot of market volatility this year for it. One of the concerns is around interest rates. The concern, I think it was yesterday when the Fed chairman spoke, they said that they were looking to continue to raise rates at least gradually through the rest of the year in that for it. That could potentially put pressure. They said it was to raise for it because of inflation. Inflation target has been 2%. And we've yet to really hit the 2% each year that they've been saying. Now they think that with the new tax changes and that for it, they're looking at 3%. Remember, the big print giveth and the small print take it away and that for it, right? So if they're raising interest rates, I always find it hard to believe that if I have to pay more for my home equity loan or anything like that I have less money in my pocket, it means that I have more money to spend. I haven't quite figured that one out yet, but I'm not the smartest guy around yet for it. So something to consider in there for it. There's an article that I was reading talking about safe withdrawal rates, managing risk when it's spending time. So, in financial planning, and when we start to look at retirement and that for it, the rule now is we're supposed to look at planning for a 30-year time horizon. And if you think about it, you could actually spend more time in retirement than you actually did working, right? And so now, if I was to ask you, what would you say would be a safe withdrawal rate to make sure that your money would last at least 30 years? As a married couple today, there is a good chance that one of the two will make it into their 90s. So we have to plan for that for it. So what would you say you would think would be a safe rate that you could take off of your money with which to make it last that long?
$100.
On a percentage basis.
Oh, percentage basis, 62%. How much the
62%. Possibly. So the average, what we're supposed to use is roughly, used to be 4% net of like expenses and fees and therefore. Today, because interest rates are so low, the expected is to use roughly 2.5 to 3%. So if you have $100,000, so to speak, we're going to say that you're expecting maybe to have $10,000 a year to spend, right? But that'd be 10% of that. In reality, in order to project it outward, it's looking at 2.5 to 3%, which would say we'd be between $2,500 and $3,000. So, is there a difference between 10,000 and call it 3,000?
Yes.
And if there is, and you need the 10,000, the question then becomes, how are we going to potentially fill in that void to get to that gap, to get to that 10,000? Alright? So it's starting to look at when we're planning, and we're starting to look at where monies are going to come from, incomes are coming from, how is that all going to fit, and then take into account potentially pensions, either the solvency or insolvency of pensions at that point, right? So you have to look at everything to say, how does that all fit together? And how is your money going to make it through and last for the period of time that we have to project that things will last? Right? I mean, does anybody know what the average age when they really started Social Security, started out what the average age of a man's longevity was at that point?
54, 54.
In the 60s. So the statistic was when people were turning 65, when that was the beginning part of Social Security, typically life expectancy for a male was 67. So that's one of the reasons why they weren't too concerned about Social Security. They figured, 67, there's going to be less people that are going to be using it in that for it. Longevity for males today is 85, and for females, 88. Right? So we're looking at living longer, technology, healthcare, all of that. We're taking better care of ourselves, eating right, and those things for us. So if you have to look at your monies to be able to last for a long period of time, how do we get those monies to do that for? And it's not going to be by sitting in a money market account earning point, whatever it is that we're earning on. Because you essentially are going to be looking to have those monies disappear. All right? And remember, the percentage isn't the same as the dollar. All right? So if you have $1,000 and you make 5%, it's different than if you have $500 and make 5%, right? You have less. You have the same percentage. You got 5%. Would you rather have 5% on a million or 10% on 100,000? 5% on a million, right? Because you don't take percentages to the bank. The bank asks when you come in and you say, "Oh, what was your percentage today?" They say, "Oh, how much cash you got to deposit?" Right? They don't care about what percentage is. They want to know what the check's going to be or what cash you're given, right? So percentages are just a mathematical calculation based upon whatever number it would be. So it's looking at how are we going to use those assets that you have. And we all kind of chuckled when I said that it's not going to cost taxpayers anything for O'Hare for it, right? So the question then becomes, we all chuckled and said, yeah, sure, that's going to happen, right? Well, if they're gonna be looking for extra money, and where do you think that money's gonna come from? It's gonna come from individuals, could be taxpayers, property taxpayers. Not that property taxes have ever gone up, and I've never seen that happen. So, property taxes could go up, sales taxes could go up. The one thing that's probably not gonna be going up very much, is, especially if you're in retirement, is your income. Right? So if they continue to chip away at what you have available for it, how are you gonna replace what they keep chipping away at? Because milk keeps going up, coffee goes up, gas has come down, but it's going back up, right? We still have expenses that we're going to incur before they wanna add additional expenses onto it. Right? So when they do that, and you look at it, how is that all going to work out? And so where do you need, if you keep chipping and chipping and chipping, you know, pretty soon there's a comedian that does a joke about Halloween. I don't know if you've ever heard of that for it. He said if you want to teach your kids about taxes, is use a Halloween. So you go out to Halloween, you know, you go to everybody's house and you collect all this candy, you come back in, he says, here's what you do. You want to teach them about taxes? You say, okay, show me your Halloween bag. They show it to you, say, take the first half out. Those are income taxes. Now they got half of their money left there. Well, I don't have much said. And then you're leaving some, you take a little more because you gotta take into your Social Security, you gotta take out, and he goes, oh, I forgot. Like healthcare or something. He takes a bite out of their last Tootsie Roll. And he's like, so the kid learns very quickly that, you know, just because you start with a lot, doesn't mean you actually end up with a lot, right? So it's kind of like those kids learning that their parents had eaten their candy and they're for it. So my youngest son is diabetic, so when he was younger, we used to have the Great Pumpkin. So we used to give him a toy and take his candy. So we weren't that bad. We didn't take all his candy. Not going to leave anything for it. So, so something that is in the paper the other day that you may not be aware of is that the government says that healthcare costs will grow faster than the economy. Does that surprise anybody? That healthcare costs continue to go up? So if healthcare costs have continued to go up, income has remained relatively stagnant, right? Hasn't gone up very much therefore it. If you have the same amount of income, costs rising, what happens to your income? Goes down, all right? So again, it's looking at other potential assets that you have to say, okay, how can we potentially look at those and put those to work so we can potentially keep pace with where we're at? Because we don't keep at least pace with inflation, right? So if inflation's running at 2 to 3% and we're earning point something percent for it, you're automatically 2.5% behind where you started at. All right, and now if you can't keep buying the same things that's there for it, you're going to be in big problems for it. So this was in the paper the other day talking about pension shortfalls. Okay, so if you can see it, it's a pension shortfall. It's somebody jumping over, and it has a person that says police pension shortfall 76 million, and below it it says taxpayers. So the police pension is underfunded by roughly 76 million. TRS, which my wife belongs to, is underfunded by about 70 billion. Right? So they have like 40 billion, but it's underfunded by 70. The problem is nobody really understands what underfunded means, because when you hear it on the TV and they say, oh, the pensions are underfunded, and the weather tomorrow is going to be sunny and bright. They never explain what it really means. What it really means is when it's underfunded, it's kind of like going on vacation and not being able to get back. You know? Right? I'm going on vacation, I spent it, I got there, but I didn't figure out how I was going to return from it, right? The only difference is you might be able to find a way to get back. When the pension runs out of money, there's no more money to pay anybody and that for it. So how do you get there for it? And another article, this was just from a couple weeks ago, is 65 police pension funds fell short. 65. Not one, not two, 65. Do we think there's a problem? Right? Yeah. And as a public pension, the Supreme Court ruling, public pensions are not guaranteed. They're considered a benefit. And as such, benefits can be changed, altered, or eliminated at any point in time. Is Social Security guaranteed, or is it a benefit? It's a benefit. Theoretically, they could stop Social Security tomorrow. I'm not saying they're going to, I'm not saying it's gonna happen, right? But they could, if they wanted to, it is a benefit. They could stop the benefit tomorrow. They never will, but they could, right? And when a public pension defaults, runs out of money, and now for it, nobody is responsible to keep making those payments. So in a private pension, you could have the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, which could come in and potentially reduce what people are getting paid in a pension. So not to pick on AT&T, but if AT&T were to have an issue for it, the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corp. Anybody remember United Airlines? So about 10 years ago, or when they went through bankruptcy in that port, when they emerged, they emerged and they turned their pension essentially over to the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation. I have a client who went through that with it. Her pension, she was supposed to receive, when she was working, about $34,000 a year in a pension. What she actually receives now is about half of that. Yes?
So is IMRF considered private or?
IMRF is a public pension. It is actually one of the only state of Illinois pensions which is fully funded at this point in time.
Okay.
So I don't know how it got there, but it's public. It's done by the municipality. So IMRF is actually one of the only, I believe, only pension. I think it's funded at about 76%. Just as a comparison, so I know TRS because my wife's into it. TRS is funded at 42%. Just to give you a perspective, a fully funded pension in a private sector would be a pension that's considered 70 to 80% funded. That means that they have 70 to 80% of all the money necessary with which to meet all their pension obligations, and therefore, right? But TRS only has 42%. You can't pour enough money into it to make it solvent. So when I had this conversation with my sister is a teacher, so I had this conversation, she's getting ready to retire. I had this conversation with her yesterday. She said, I think I'm going to be able to live out. I think I'm going to be good. I said, you're going to meet TRS, ask them when their pension runs out. She said, what do you mean? I said, well, it's only funded at 42%. I said, so at some point in time, it's going to run out. You need to know when, because we need to start to prepare for some point in time in the future. A few years ago, they gave it a projection that it was like 2029. Could be with market performance, could be like 2030, but that's not like 2200, right? I mean, it's not like it's 100 years from now. We're talking a relatively short period of time, and that's just TRS. Any of you that are in Chicago, and if you're in Cook County, if you're in Chicago and you look at your property taxes, so Cook County has, if you look on your property tax bill, about the middle section of the bill is kind of a grayed out section, right? You have the first installment at the top says you owe whatever you owe, right? And you have this section in the middle and it talks numbers, it talks about CPS, and it talks about the general pension portion. If you look at the general portion, if you notice, it doesn't specifically say anything about police or fire in the ones listed there. The general one is funded about 21%. Okay? 21%, the statistics were a few years ago, I believe, that Chicago Fire Fund would be out of money in about the next 4 or 5 years. And the police would be about 4 or 5 years after that, and the CPS is out in like 2034 or something along those lines. So, in my opinion, when you hear the mayor talking about he wants to consolidate pensions, and therefore, if I take two bad companies, in my opinion, Sears and Kmart, and put them together, I don't get a good company, right? But if I take all my pensions and I consolidate them together, what happens? They don't go out of business on my watch. Right? So you probably won't run again. And when they go out of business, you say, hey, not my fault. Whoever's there now, that's don't look at me, right? So just so you need to prepare. So those are always questions. If you do have a pension, or you're looking at your pension, every year by law they have to send out an annual statement to give you an idea of how that pension is faring. You cannot control it. You cannot control the investments. You can't control anything. But you need to look at it because you need to look and see how well funded it says the pension is. If in a private sector, if the private sector were like TRS funded at 42%, it would have been taken over by PBGC years ago. All right. So there's lots of ways potentially to fix it, which will never happen. actually goes defaults in that for it, then it'll become a crisis that they have to fix in that for it. So, so those are just some areas that you need to just be aware of. Yes.
What about the new teachers that are coming in?
So the question was about new teachers. So
Are they paying into it?
I can speak for TRS because I went to the meeting for it. There are in TRS there are two tiers. There's a tier 1 and a tier 2. Okay. Tier 1 are basically, I think, people who were hired before 2010. It could have been a little bit later, but I think that was the year. Okay. But here's the one thing I learned about tier 2 versus tier 1. If you're a tier 2 employee, if I told you, let's say you made $50,000 a year, and I told you, guess what? You're going to make $50,000 a year, but I'm going to take 2% from you, and I'm going to give it to him. For as long as you're a teacher, because you're in tier 2. And then you get none of that 2%. You're just kind of giving it away. That's what happens in tier 2. So tier 2 is required, they pay 2%. 2% goes to pay tier 1. Now, last time I checked, if I take your money to give it to him, that's called a Ponzi scheme. People go to jail for it, right? But in Illinois, it's legal. So tier 2, you pay 2% of your pay, and they give it to tier 1, which you never see. If you're a tier 2, you never see it. It's not yours, it's gone, right? And then they have 1% that goes into like a pension portion, and then you have the 403B or that to be able to help pay it. So tier 2 is different than tier 1. But if I'm a tier 2 hire, I'm pretty upset because I'm gonna have money that I'm giving away theoretically. If I'm a teacher for 30 years, I will have given 2% of my pay away for the last 30 years that I am never ever gonna see again. I don't know about you, but that would make me angry. But that's
Tier 3, pay tier 2.
they haven't gotten to tier 3 yet, so I'm sure that's just coming, you know? Tier 3 doesn't get paid at all, they just pay everybody else, that's all.
Who pays tier 2?
Well, kind of themselves, they pay 1% into the pension, I believe it is, and then, but that's not very much, and then they reduce the pension area, so there's a whole, I went to a TRS meeting, not to get stuck on that, but it was very interesting. It was the worst presentation I ever saw in my entire life. I was so aggravated I left. Okay? They got up there and they started doing their presentation, and the person that's in charge got up, the guy who runs all TRS, he gets up there and he says, he's doing the PowerPoint, he's flipping there, and there's a big question. It says, people always ask, will TRS beat? I'm like, no, that's not the question, but okay, let's see. And then the next slide was this big yes. And I thought to myself, well, wait a second. You're a government entity, right? TRS is going to be there in some form or fashion. That's not the question. The question is does TRS have enough money to meet all of their pension obligations that they have both present and future? I mean, isn't that really the question? It's not whether the entity of TRS is going to be there, right? It's like saying, you know, we're the police, we're going to be here. Well, yeah, you're a public entity, we're expecting that you're going to be there. There's still going to be teachers, there's still going to be some type of pension, there's still something there for it. So as a department, yeah, I would expect TRS to be there. But that's not the question. The question is, do you have enough money to make all of these required payments that you're supposed to have to make for the next, I don't know, eternity? Right? I mean, because assuming that kids are still born and we still educate them, and if they're not in Chicago, they're getting, this is all, so I'm assuming that that's happening. So how are you going to meet those obligations? And you weren't allowed to ask questions. They had like 4 people in different corners of the room, and afterwards you could go and ask questions, and therefore, and the real irony to the whole thing was that when he got up and was talking, he said that it wasn't their fault, it was the state's fault. And I said, that's fine, you can blame whoever you want, we still have a problem that hasn't been fixed for it. And then he showed the numbers, and he said that they're supposed to have about 115 billion, and they actually have like 40 billion. But then what I really didn't understand was there was something of that 40 billion of the tier 2 people. Supposedly like 10 billion went to tier 2. I didn't understand how, but I said, okay, if that's the case, then you really only have 30 billion, right? If that 10 billion is kind of off the table. So now you're projections are actually worse than what you're saying because you've got less money in the pot, right? But you weren't allowed to ask questions. So, so I got very aggravated and I threw my hands up and walked out. And as I was walking out, it was funny because I was dressed as I am now with my top coat and that for it. And all these eyes in the back of the room, all these eyes literally started following me. Well, something like, well, what does he know? He looks like he must be important. He's dressed in a suit and that for it. And they were all teachers and that for it. So he must be important. He must be an accountant, a lawyer, somebody here for it. It was just funny because I just felt like, you can feel just like people following you. I was just like, I kind of turned around like, oh, he's kind of like that guy in the elevator, kind of and the herd mentality. I guess nobody left with me, but so those are things you just need to be concerned about. You can't control them, but you just need to know what they are because if you know that the road is running out of, going to go over the cliff, we may want to be able to start to build a bridge before we actually get to the cliff, all right? So that's just kind of looking at what's there for. So I didn't mean to digress. Any questions? All right. Thank you very much. We will look forward to seeing you next month.